Happy that all of you are here. I'll give it another second or two and we'll get started. Welcome everyone. Just let us know where you're logging in from today. Thank you everyone for joining us today for today's ILEA Keynote webinar. My name is Gwendolyn McNutt, CSCP, and I'm the chair of the Professional Development Committee. Thank you so much for being here. Today we'll be presenting Building Resilience in Turbulent Times, powered by Giants Enterprises. Thank you, Giants Enterprises, for your continued support. We're excited to bring you today's presentation, and we hope that you come away with new ideas, perspectives, and strategies to apply to your own businesses and careers. We have just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. We will be recording today's session, and it will be posted on the ILEA Hub. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many of them at the end of the discussion as we can. Also, share your thoughts and comments in the chat. And finally, share your experience on social media using the hashtags ILEA Webinar Wednesday and ILEA Welcomes All. And don't forget, the 2021 ILEA Esprit Awards are now accepting submissions and are open to our entire events community. Submissions are due on Monday, March 15th. You can submit your entries at www.ileahub.com/Esprit Awards. Today's keynote speaker is Patrick Nelson. Patrick has gained both local and national accolades for his military service, academic career, and work as a professional speaker and trainer, including being named the inaugural NFL Tillman Military Scholar. He is an experienced leader that spent nearly 7 years in the U.S. Army as a paratrooper and completed 3 combat deployments leading soldiers. His military awards include the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. Patrick is an engaging facilitator that has led leadership development programs for a variety of clients, from Fortune 500 clients to small businesses and across a variety of industries. Off the proverbial leadership field, he serves his community by actively volunteering with Tee It Up for the Troops, a nonprofit organization that raises money for wounded veterans. Patrick studied at Minnesota State University and received a bachelor's degree, graduating magna cum laude. He holds a master's degree in sport management from Minnesota State and a master's in organizational development from Pepperdine University. And a fun fact about Patrick, he loves true crime and true crime podcasts, and I liked him right away. Please welcome Patrick Nelson.
Thank you very much, Gwen. You're right. I am a true crime podcast junkie. Feel free to blow up that chat over there with any recommendations, because I'm always looking for it. I know Gwen is as well. So thank you very much. I am very honored to be here. I see some of you leaving some very nice thank yous for my service on the chat, and I really appreciate that. And it's awesome to see where you all are joining us from as well. I have 3 goals for our time together today. Number 1, I want you to leave here inspired. Number 2, I want you to leave with at least 1 practical tip that you can start practicing today. And number 3, which is the most important to me, is I want you to have fun. I know many of us are suffering from Zoom fatigue. I get it. I've got some slides that I'm going to show you, but I promise you I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death, because I've got some fun built in there as well. And if it helps, feel free to make a game out of it. Anytime I mention COVID or reference it, just go ahead and take a drink of whatever's next to you. Hopefully it's water, tea, or coffee, but that's certainly, obviously, your prerogative. I'm not going to tell if you won't. Now, the first thing I want to do, though, is I want to get the blood flowing a little bit. It's nothing too strenuous. All you have to do is look at me and follow directions. Now, I can't see you, so we're on the honor system here, okay? Everybody's nodding their head north and south. All right, here's what I need you to do. Follow my direction. Just go ahead and put 1 finger in the air. There you go. I'm pretending that I can see you, just like that. Now 2, now 3. And now just kind of twirl it around right there. There you go. Great job. Now just go ahead and put it right there in your chin. All right. Hop in the chat quick. Who put it on their cheek like I did? Don't lie. Dawn from St. Paul, you're saying you went to the chin. Chin, chin. Some people went to chin, cheek, right? Well, why is that? As humans, we have a tendency to mirror the behavior of others around us, for better or for worse. If we're not exhibiting these great leadership behaviors that we know are important, how do we expect to be able to influence those around us? But the good news is it works for the good stuff as well. So it's just something fun to remember that our actions and how much louder they speak than our words. Now, we've all faced adversity in our lives to varying degrees, and certainly some more than others. And we're all facing it right now with this pandemic. And how you respond to it really helps set you apart from others. And I think it's safe to say we've all experienced those ebbs and flows of our emotions over the last years. Sometimes we just might feel like, blah, and we're in the camp of, you know what, wake me up when this thing is over. The next day, we're ready to run through a brick wall like the Kool-Aid man. And the next day, we're in the camp of the sky is falling, help me now. I've been there. And it's not a very fun roller coaster to be on. But what I found to be helpful during times of adversity is building something called smart resiliency. Smart resiliency is understanding that you're still going to have those days where your emotions spike, because that's normal during any times of challenge and change. But it's also recognizing that putting your head down and sucking it up is not sustainable. Trust me, because I've tried it. What I have today are 4 very, very practical things that you can take away. Now, I'm not always the most sentimental guy out there, but I want you to know that it does mean a lot to me that you are here and that you're taking time out of your day to join me. And I want to quickly share why. In February of last year, really when the full impact of COVID was unknown, I was let go from my job, something I know that some of you have experienced. And it was a job I held for a little over 5 years, one that took me all over the world, doing some really awesome work. And I cried. My wife and I were 12 months into the adoption journey. And just 2 weeks prior to being let go, we had went through what's known as a failed match, where basically the birth mother was attempting to scam us in the agency. So we lost out on $15,000, which is a lot of money. But what hurt much worse was the emotional investment that we had, thinking that we were going to be bringing a baby home in a few short weeks. Now, after being let go, I have no financial security, no idea how I'm going to meet my obligations, let alone continue on this adoption journey. But for better or worse, I did what I know best. I wiped the tears away and I got to work. An hour after being let go, I registered an LLC, threw a website together, and I used these tips that I'm going to share with you to navigate it. And I know it goes without saying, it's been really tough, but I definitely know that it could have been worse, especially if I was not equipped with the tools to handle adversity. In fact, it's been a little over a year now, and my runway is still getting shorter and shorter with this dream of mine. And the fact that you all are here joining me means everything to me. So thank you. And for those of you that are wondering, I do just want to pull up my slides here for you all. And if you can just confirm for me that you are seeing them. If somebody can hop in the chat quick, just say, yes, Patrick, I see your slides. No, I don't. Thank you very much. Make sure we're all on the same page. But for those of you that are wondering, my wife and I did continue on that adoption journey. And in May of last year, we brought home our beautiful daughter, Haven. And she has been such a bright spot in our lives. And I continue to work every day as hard as I can for them. Now, what I'm going to share with you today has its origin in my military experience, where I had the honor and the great opportunity to work with a diverse team of soldiers from all different walks of life, representing different nations and races from literally across the world. And it's been those experiences that have helped provide me the opportunity to be here. And I want to share some of my experiences, some of my stories from my experience with you, and they might feel kind of far away, maybe even disconnected. But when it comes to resilience in the face of adversity, there's a lot of foundational similarities. And I want to share one story in particular with you that changed my life forever. On June 8th, 2005, I was operating out of a small forward operating base on the Pakistani border. It was at a place called Fabshkin. This was one of those places where you were short on everything except the enemy. We faced regular indirect fire attacks and participated in several large battles that saw between 50 to 100 enemy fighters each time. On this particular morning, we had a Chinook helicopter coming in to resupply us with some new ammunition. Now, resupply procedures were a common part of our weekly work. Our platoon was divided into two sections, and when a resupply would come in, one of those sections would be designated as the hot gun, which meant they had to stand ready to respond to any type of attack, while the other section was tasked with unloading the supplies from that helicopter. On this day, my section was the hot gun. However, the other section had a sergeant leaving to go on R&R. He was going to get on that helicopter. So I was going to backfill a position in the other section. So as the helicopter approached, I hopped in a Humvee with my good friend Luke. And just before we left to go out to the landing zone, my soldier, Emmanuel Hernandez, hopped in the back. Now, he was supposed to be back with the hot gun. So I turned around and I was about to yell at him. But I thought for a second, you know what? I value that kind of work ethic. He wants to come lift some heavy boxes and help out the team. I know that our section will be fine without him. It'll be no problem. And just as I was turning back around, I realized that he didn't have his helmet on. And so I literally opened my mouth to say something. But then I realized I didn't have mine on either. And it's kind of hard for me to say something if I'm not doing the right thing. So I said nothing. And as the helicopter landed, a group of 10 of us stepped to the side of the aircraft so they could take the machine gun off the rear ramp and we could start unloading it. We couldn't hear each other. The rotor blades were turning, but my platoon sergeant handed me this piece of paper that had some serial numbers to items we were expecting, basically telling me it's my responsibility to make sure we got those specific items. So I grabbed that piece of paper from him and I began to turn around and ground guide Luke, who was in the Humvee, get him a little bit closer to the back of the helicopter. And the next thing I remember, it was bam. And it was lights out for a few seconds. And as I'm laying on the ground, disoriented, unable to hear, I thought maybe somebody was playing a joke and had hit me on the head and, maybe just went too far. But then I looked up and there were bodies and there were blood all over the ground. The helicopter powered down, my hearing quickly came back, and I heard that very distinct whistle of an incoming 107 millimeter rocket. So I quickly got up and I dove underneath the Humvee for cover as rockets started to impact all around. And I quickly realized it was a rocket that landed next to me that had knocked me down. And as I laid there, I was thinking about the soldiers that were still laying on the ground out in the open as the rockets were coming in. As the barrage finally ended, I crawled out from underneath the Humvee and I started making my way back to the soldiers that were still on the ground, unsure of what I was going to find. And as I was doing that, a Marine yelled from behind me that I'd been hit. Up until that point, I hadn't felt any pain, but I turned my head and I looked at the back of my uniform and it was shredded and blood was starting to pour out. And it was at that moment that the pain hit me. And just like we trained for, the other soldiers quickly triaged those of us that were wounded, loaded us up into whatever type of vehicle they could find, and brought us into this small clinic that was ran by an Afghan doctor that was on our base that treated locals. Now, my wounds were very, very minor compared to everybody else. I was peppered in the back with shrapnel, a few small holes, nothing too serious, but it absolutely hurt. And I was quickly bandaged up by Luke as the others were being treated. And I saw Sergeant Michael Kelly, a supply sergeant who was recently attached to us, laying on this elevated stretcher off the ground. And the local Afghan doctor who worked in the clinic, all 5 feet and 2 inches of him, standing on this red milk crate, performing CPR on Michael. And I did a quick lap around the clinic to see who else was hurt. And I came across my platoon sergeant, the one who just handed me that piece of paper prior to the explosion. He was laying on the ground on a stretcher, and you can't see him in the picture, but you see my friend Landon there holding his IV. He's laying on the ground. He has a tourniquet on his leg. The femoral artery in his leg was severed, along with other severe wounds. And when I kind of came back around to that position, it could have been more than 30 or 45 seconds. And by then they had lowered Michael, who they were doing CPR on, to the ground, and were zipping him up into a body bag. And I found my way into a small room in the back of the clinic where I found my soldier, Emmanuel. He was unconscious, his head was bandaged, and he had some people working on him. We were fortunate to have a battalion surgeon from the Special Forces at our location that day. So I knew that he was in good hands. And I saw his chest rise and fall. So I knew that he was breathing. And I grabbed him by the hand and I said, "Hey, everything's going to be okay, buddy." And medevac helicopters arrived and brought us a forward surgical team spread throughout the country. I was on a helicopter with my platoon sergeant. By then he had lost consciousness and things weren't looking too good. But thanks to the quick thinking of our soldiers on the ground for putting the tourniquet on and the skill of the surgical team, he survived and he kept his leg. In fact, I saw him in person 3 weeks ago and he's doing awesome. At that surgical team, they removed several pieces of shrapnel from my back. They left a few souvenirs in there for me that were a little too deep. I still carry with me today. They stitched me up, bandaged me up, and sent me back to the landing zone for another helicopter ride to Bagram Airfield for some more advanced care. And as I was waiting there, my commander approached me to see how I was doing. And I said, "I'm going to be just fine." I said, "Well, how's Emmanuel?" And he told me he was going to be okay. And I just felt so relieved. And he turned to walk away and he got 4 or 5 steps and he turned around and with tears coming down both of his cheeks, he said, "I'm sorry that I lied. Hernandez didn't make it." My knees got weak and I hit the ground as my commander embraced me. Emmanuel died because shrapnel from the explosion hit him in the head. He died because I wasn't doing the right thing. Because I didn't have the courage to speak up and to say something. And there's been so many days where I thought how simple it would have been for me to say, wait, hey guys, let's go grab our helmets. It would have taken a matter of moments. Nothing would have been delayed. Just that morning at breakfast, Emmanuel was telling another soldier how he couldn't wait to get home and start having kids. And if only I would have just paused for a moment and spoke up. Emmanuel's wife, Jessica, would still have her husband. His wife, his beautiful wife, they would be growing a family. His mother would still have her son. And Emmanuel would still have his life ahead of him. But guess what? We've done it just like that 100 times before and nothing's ever happened. And you always think it won't happen to you. And it's that old cliche of a 1 in a million chance. I'm here to tell you that it can. And I beat myself up for years and years and years after that incident. I tried to drink my problems away. I tried to wash them away with pills. I was addicted to Vicodin and morphine for 5 years. And of course, none of that worked. They only served as accelerants for challenges I was already facing. And I obviously can't change the past. But I've learned that I can take that story and I can inspire others and I can influence the future. And I've been able to do that by practicing some of the tips that I'm going to share with you all today. But first, I want to get your all opinion on a couple of things. So I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need you to take your phone, okay, if you're sitting at your computer, and pull it out. And I want you to scan the QR code that you're going to see on the screen right here, because we're going to do some interactive polling. So if you don't know how to do that, all you do is you take your phone, you open your camera app, and you point it right there at the QR code, the big white square to the right of the screen. You don't actually take a picture. A little dialog box will pop open and we'll ask if you want to open this website, and go ahead and do that. If for some reason you're here on your phone, you can open your browser and go to slido.com and you just enter that event number right at the top of the screen, the pound sign and then X399. So there's no poll question up there yet, but if somebody can hop in the chat and confirm to me that it works. Rachel, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and get this first question going for you all. I just want to get your opinion on a few things. All right, so the first one is, I want to know what state or country were you born in? Just curious. What state or country were you born in? Ohio, Texas, Hong Kong, love it. India, Canada. all over the States and all over the world. What a representation. I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, as we got more coming in, let's go to the next question quick. If you could vacation anywhere in the world with money and time not an issue, where would you go? Where would your dream vacation be? Germany, Italy. Oh, Italy. I spent some time there. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Thailand. My wife and I went to Thailand a couple years ago. Absolutely loved it. So many locations that I want to go here. Key West, I saw. My wife and I got married in the Florida Keys, Duck Key, if anybody's familiar with that. Oh, the Arctic. I love that one because that's a little non-traditional, but I think would be so cool. Hawaii. Oh, man. Africa. Love it. Buenos Aires, South Padre, where your parents are. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to see our family again in person? Okay, so next question, and it's going to be the last one, but it's going to be a little bit more oriented towards what we're going to talk about today, okay? So I want to know, what was your biggest challenge pre-COVID? I know we're thinking back, historical times, right? Jog your memory. Prior to COVID, from a professional standpoint, what was your biggest challenge in your job? Traffic. Oh my goodness, the death of your 33. Yeah, absolutely. That just impacts everything we do. And I'm so sorry to hear that. Toxic boss, time management, heavy workload, winter. That's obviously, ILEA, you guys running events outside, I would imagine. I'd be more interested to learn more about that. Trying to grow, a lot of time management on here. Wow, I have a specific time management course that I do as well. Being a young professional, bad team fit, co-locating, budgets, always budgets. But you can see based on this list here, just the variety and the depth of the challenges that everybody faced before COVID. Well, now let's throw this huge wrench into it all. And let me put about 12 different things on top of it. Obviously not a lot of fun. But I understand. Because I'm what I like to call an accidental leader. I was not born or bred to do great things. I wasn't bred to be leading soldiers in combat someday. In fact, the deck was stacked against me before I was born with the challenges I faced. My mother was single, 19, unemployed, living on government assistance. No father figure in sight. The statistics showed I was twice as likely to drop out of school, more likely to end up in jail, higher chance of a drug or alcohol problem, which I did have, higher chance of being abused and neglected. Basically, I was destined to fail at life. People did not look at me when I was growing up and saying, man, that kid right there, he's going to go do some great things someday. Natural born leader. My mother had 2 more kids with one guy. We had a few years of stability in our life. But then she got married to a guy that had 2 kids of his own and a substance abuse problem. So growing up, I saw some drugs in the house. I came out of school one day. My mother's getting arrested, put in the back of a cop car. My stepsister committed suicide in rehab. I took my mom to court because I didn't want to live there, ran away from home. It was a pretty, for lack of a better word, crappy childhood. But don't be mistaken, because it could have always been worse. And I like to keep things in perspective. And I'm sure some of you can even relate to the challenges that I faced. Now, the University of Minnesota, my home state here, has done a lot of studies on identical twins. And one of those studies was a longitudinal one. So they followed these twins who were separated at birth for years and years and years. And what they found out of the behavior, skills, characteristics, attributes to help somebody be an effective leader, 30% of those are things that we actually inherit in our DNA. Everything from our good looks to charisma to our IQ to a certain extent. But the good news is, for those of you holding your breath and that missed out on the DNA lottery like myself, we've got the other 70% that we can rely on. These are things that we can grow, develop, and get better at. And those are things that I like to focus on. Now, I barely graduated high school. I stumbled my way into a small junior college in West Central Minnesota. I didn't have the type of family that took me on college visits, helped me fill out applications, helped me fill out financial aid forms. I had to do it myself. I had no real direction. And I started skipping classes that first week. It's safe to say I was headed nowhere pretty fast. Now, I'm curious, hop in the chat here. How many of y'all remember where you were on 9/11? Those that were old enough, Do you remember where you were on September 11th, 2001? College dorm. Yep. A lot of yeses. At work, teaching high school. Some of you, I bet, were probably in high school. Fourth grade class. Yes, absolutely. We remember where we were. Well, I remember where I was. I was in the third week of my first semester at that community college. And as I watched on TV, like many of you, I felt those same feelings: helplessness, sorrow, anger. So 2 days after the attacks, I dropped out of college and I joined the Army. Now, that man you see in the picture there, that's the man that my wife married, because that was about 35 pounds ago. I am a little softer on the edges these days. But I went on to serve as a paratrooper in the historic 173rd Airborne Brigade based out of Vicenza, Italy for 6 years, 10 months, and 22 days. Not that I counted or anything. And I eventually deployed to Iraq for 12 months during the initial invasion. I was 20 years old. I went to Iraq for 12 months, or excuse me, Afghanistan for 12 months. This is a tour I got wounded on. That's my soldier, Emmanuel Hernandez, in the picture on the left, holding our guide-on flag, the red flag. And I loved it all so much. I went back to Afghanistan again for 15 months on my last tour. And I'll share some of the experiences from my time in the military and how they've shaped me into the leader that I am today. And I know the challenges that we all face may look different on the surface. I mean, you all are not going to be getting rockets raining down on you or deployed to one of the most dangerous places on the planet for 15 months. But the fundamental pieces that got me through that also got me through the challenges that I faced back at home: job loss, career insecurity, fear of the unknown, difficult relationships, mental health challenges. And I don't think I'm breaking any news to you, but it all starts with you. You have to be able to lead yourself first to navigate challenging times. Taking care of yourself is not self-centered. It's really about being a good steward of the gifts that you have to give this world. And resilient leaders have the ability to sustain their energy level under pressure, to cope with disruptive changes and adapt. In the military, I often went over 24 hours without sleep. And newsflash, that's not sustainable or a good practice. And I'd also venture to say that many of you at one point or another have gone long periods of time not getting the ideal rest that your body and minds need to fully recover. And I don't need to jump too much into the obvious, but your industry has been hit extremely hard. And I like to consider it our industry because I'm in it too. You've seen business disappear overnight with no real certainty of when it's going to come back. So what are we going to do? Are we going to sit in the corner and cry about it? That's actually okay, because I'm all for letting your emotions out. But the fact that you're here right now, that you're taking the time, means you've picked yourself up, you're ready to make it happen, and you're ready to try something a little bit different. Now, you frequently heard of time management. I know a lot of you mentioned time management as your biggest challenge. But let's talk about something a little more significant: energy management. To have the energy to navigate challenges, you have to be able to manage it every single day. Because let's face it, our energy wanes. It normally takes a lot of energy to focus and concentrate, so much so that by the end of the day, our energy is depleted. Now go ahead and throw in all the uncertainty of our current environment, and it makes it easy to lose our willpower. And this idea of energy management isn't some sort of fad. It's actually a business practice that's employed across industries that have a high demand on knowledge workers. Yet they also recognize that there's diminishing returns when people work longer. So why not help them work smarter? So before I dive into those practical tips, I want to take this self-assessment on our energy. So you're going to need a pen or a piece of paper just to keep a tally of your score. So we're going to look at 4 dimensions of energy. And basically all you're going to do, if you agree with the statement that I read, you give yourself 1 point. And keep sort of 4 separate columns for each one, and then we'll add them all together at the end. All right, so I'm going to read them, and you just think about your answer. They'll be on the screen, but just think about your answer and give a tick mark if you agree. So the first one, talking about body. I don't regularly get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and I often wake up feeling tired. Next one, I frequently skip breakfast, or I settle for something that is not nutritious. Next, I don't work out enough, meaning cardiovascular training at least 3 times a week and strength training at least once a week. And the last one, under body, I don't take regular breaks during the day to truly renew and recharge, or I often eat lunch on the go. All right, moving along to emotions. I frequently feel find myself feeling irritable, impatient, or anxious, especially when situations are demanding. Second one, I don't have enough time with my family and loved ones. And when I'm with them, I'm not always really with them. All right, next one. I have too little time for the activities that I most deeply enjoy. And the last one under emotions, I don't stop frequently enough to express my appreciation to others or to savor my accomplishments and blessings. All right, moving on to mind. I have difficulty focusing on one thing at a time, and I'm easily distracted during the day. Second one, I spend much of my day reacting to immediate crises and demands rather than focusing on activities with longer-term value and higher leverage. Next one, I don't take enough time for reflection, strategizing, and creative thinking. And the last one, I almost never take a work-free vacation. All right, one more dimension to cover under spirit. First one, I don't spend enough time doing what I do best and enjoy most. Next one, there are significant gaps between what I say is most important to me in life and how I allocate my time and energy. Next one, my decisions are more often influenced by external demands than by a strong, clear sense of my own purpose. And the last one, I don't invest enough time and energy in making a positive difference to others or to the world. Okay, so here's the scoring key. Total up the number of statements that you checked, and then total them up as well by the dimension. And I'll give you about a minute to do that. And you can kind of look over on the right to see what your score is. And once you have that, give us a little summary in the chat of where you're at. Is anybody in a full-fledged energy crisis here? Kylene's got a 9, Robin's at an 11, 10, full-fledged. We need some help. A 14, Barbara. I've got some good tips for you here. Hang with me. Oh, Nash is too tired to even type that. I don't have the energy to do that. Lori. Okay, now this isn't the most scientific, but it is a self-assessment, right? So you can't blame anybody but yourself here. But this is based on the work of a guy by the name of Tony Schwartz, who's done a lot of research into energy management. So I appreciate you all. Excellent. Oh, some of you got good ones. So, hey, I'm going to go over some practical tips, but I encourage you to share some as well. All right. Moving on. Thank you so much for sharing your scores. Now, there's only so much that others can do to really help you be more resilient, but there's plenty that you can do to help better manage your energy. Remember, the tips I'm going to share here are very, very practical. And honestly, they may not work for all of you, but you have to try. But don't try all at once, because then you're just setting yourself up for failure. It's like when I started a new diet. Monday morning, I wake up and I'm drinking some sort of seaweed, plant-based protein. I'm taking all these supplements down. I'm eating lean meats. I'm working out 2 times a day because that's what we did in high school football. And then I get to like Wednesday and I'm just depleted. And so I said, well, you know what? I owe myself a cheat day. I've gone 3 days on this diet, changing everything. So Thursday, I'm running through the drive-thru everywhere. I'm eating donuts. I'm drinking sugary pop or soda, as some know it. And of course, then I wake up Friday and I feel like this. And I tell myself, I'm going to start again on Monday. Always something about Monday, right? Well, you can start a diet in the middle of a bag of chips, I found out. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. You set yourself up for failure when you try to change too much. So again, go ahead, take one thing from this. Now, I have yet to find one person that does not have some sort of stress in their lives. We all face it. Some of you may practice meditation. Some of you may not believe in it. I used to be in the latter group, but a few years ago, I went through this master's program in organization development from Pepperdine University. And I went into the program wanting to learn, how can I help organizations be better? I wanted that transactional piece. But what I got was a whole lot more. The first 2 intensive sessions focus all on what's called a self as instrument. To me, I didn't buy in right away. That kind of stuff is not up my alley, and I resisted. But I definitely came around, and it was a very transformative experience for me. And most valuable things that I learned were some of the easiest. And so some of you may know this one, or you might know it by a different name. I call it 448. As someone that's faced a lot of stress, I had no idea how breathing was going to be able to help me, but it has. And the research behind the benefits of meditative breathing are pretty interesting. I can't sit here and tell you all about the science behind it, but as someone that struggles with a lot of physical pain due to my wounds and the shrapnel still on my back, it's definitely helped ease my pain. And in terms of dealing with stress, it's helped me tremendously. I don't know if any of you are like me, but my mind is usually full of a couple different things fighting for attention at the same time. It's chaos up here. And it makes it hard to concentrate and focus. But this technique has helped me tremendously. But here's the hard part. It only works if you do it. Okay, so all you have to do is you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you exhale for 8. I usually do between 5 to 7 rounds of that prior to most tasks. I did it before I came on here. So I want you to go ahead and give it a try. Do 3 rounds. I'm not going to count for you, but do 3 rounds. Breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, and exhale for 8. Go ahead. Okay, thank you very much. Now, again, it's a lot like a seatbelt. It only works if you use it, okay? Negativity is a lot like a vampire, it drains your energy. And I personally found a direct correlation between when I have a positive attitude and my energy, and also when I have a negative attitude and my energy being low. A negative attitude is a lot like that vampire. It's just sucking the energy out of you. And I often have people ask me, how are you so positive all the time? Why are you always smiling? And I can't really put my finger on one thing, but I do know that a big part of it is being able to manage the voice in my head and the narrative that I tell myself. I used to be consumed by negativity, and it impacted everything, my relationships, my work, my health, until I really understood my narrative, especially not only my military, but growing up. But I took steps to retake that back. And one of them, which is really, really small, and for many of you, you're going to say that's just semantics. But I started to replace the word have with get. Instead of saying, I have to go to work today, I have to wake up early. How about I get to go to work? I get to wake up early. Some of you might be laughing because when I first did this, I did that. But I was challenged to be intentional about it for 1 week, to give it a try. I had nothing to lose. And the main thing it did, it helped shift my perspective and really how I viewed the world. And in turn, helped me be more empathetic towards others, which in turn helped bring more positivity in my life. Now, the next tip that I have probably runs counterintuitive to everything that you've heard in the past. I know it did for me, but this comes straight out of Harvard Medical School and is based on some of the latest research out there. I don't really know anyone that says they get the ideal amount of sleep. So go ahead and try getting less sleep. This definitely seems wrong, but some researchers have found that determining how much sleep you actually need can reduce the time you spend in bed not sleeping. So the process makes it easier to fall asleep and helps promote more restful sleep in the long run. So here's how you do it. Avoid taking naps during the day, which is hard. Who doesn't love naps? The first night, go to bed later than you usually do and get an hour or two less of sleep compared to what you usually get. Then if you feel that you slept well during that period, add another 15 to 30 minutes of sleep the next night. As long as you're sleeping soundly the entire time that you're in bed, slowly keep adding sleep on successive nights. Again, I know that may run counterintuitive. You may be like, nope, not doing it, Patrick. That's dumb. I trust the people at Harvard that are doing this research. You've got nothing to lose. Give it a try. Now, again, my challenge for you is to take just one thing from this list. And I'd love for you to keep me posted on how it goes. So to successfully navigate challenges, our mindset matters. Cultivating the growth mindset is the second key to smart resiliency. And I'm not a neuroscientist. I only play one on webinars, but I've learned that our brains are not as hardwired as we used to think. And I'm sure the concept of a growth mindset is not new to you. People with a growth mindset, they thrive on challenges. They view failures as learning opportunities, as opposed to those with that fixed mindset who they kind of like to stay in their safety zone, which I like to say is like that nookie blankie, like this is what I know how to do and I can do it pretty well, but I don't want to try anything else because heaven forbid I might fail. Now, the best way that I found that to sustain that growth mindset is to better train our brains to respond instead of react. And the psychological term for it is called cognitive discipline. It's our ability to inhibit instinctual, conditioned, or habitual reactions and use more thought-out responses instead. And that's tough because when the pressure's on, when something touches the nerve, when we're triggered, our brain gets hijacked by the fight, flight, or freeze concept. And there's a ton of studies in neuroscience that have looked at this. You probably heard the term known as amygdala hijack. But what's great is that research has also found that we can train ourselves to override those oftentimes instantaneous reactions. Think for a second. How do you feel when an event or contractor starts canceling things or changing things at the last minute? What's your initial reaction? Or even as you've worked your way forward now through this pandemic, maybe you're submitting RFPs for new events. What is it like to get a no? Has it made you question your ability? I probably get 4 or 5 no's a day. I still don't like it, but this helps. Trust me. Less than 1 month after I left the Army, I found myself sitting in a college classroom with a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old kids. And their biggest worry was who's going to buy their beer? Where's the party? Now, I was 26 at the time, and I felt like the old man on campus. But looking back, obviously 26 is still pretty young. And I was studying sport management, and I was attending university where the Minnesota Vikings held training camp, and I was named that first ever NFL Pat Tillman Military Scholar. So it was a perfect combination, led me to my first job outside the military, working as a marketing intern at Minnesota Vikings training camp. And I will never, ever, ever forget that first day because the person in charge of all the interns was another intern. It was a 21-year-old kid with a clipboard. And he's going around and he's letting everybody know what they're going to be doing for the day. And he gets to me and he says, Patrick, you're going to watch the kids jump in the inflatable bounce house. Come again? I mean, I was a staff sergeant when I left the military. I had a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart. I led soldiers in combat. I had all that responsibility. And now I'm going to watch the kids jump in the bounce house? Definitely not what I expected. And I could feel that physiological reaction my body was having. I started getting a little bit shaky. I mean, these people had no idea the value that I could have. But thankfully, one of the most important lessons that I learned in the military is how to control my reactions and use more thought-out response instead. I had a vision of working in pro sports. And if I would have let my emotions manifest into behavior and actions, there was no way that that was going to come true. And there's a great analogy out there when it comes to reaction versus response, and it's called the elephant and the rider. So the elephant, the big, beautiful, majestic animal, represents reactions or your emotional part of your brain. And the rider, that very little tiny person on top, represents the logical part of your brain or your response. And if that little person on top has no idea what they're doing, which way do we think the elephant will go? Whichever way it wants to go. But just imagine if that little person on top is trained, if they know what they're doing, they can keep that elephant on the same exact path where they want to go. So I want to give you all a little bit of a test. And I'm sure you obviously came prepared for it, but don't worry, you only have to get 70%. All you have to do is repeat your answers loud and proud. Now, I'm not going to be able to hear you. Again, we're on the honor system, okay? So it kind of reads like an eye chart. It goes left to right, top to bottom, and you're going to have 15 seconds to complete it. So here are the instructions, okay? State the color of the words. Okay, stop what you're doing. Hop in the chat. What'd you do? Tell me what happened. Sarah, damn it. Said the word, right? Of course. Why? Because that's what we're used to doing. That's our conditioned reaction. And you needed to override that reaction. You needed to exercise the cognitive discipline. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got when it comes to training yourself to override reactions came from a former colleague of mine who used to fly F-16s in the Air Force. And one day he asked me, he said, what do you think one of the first things they teach us in pilot training is when an alarm goes off in the cockpit? I said, I don't know. You probably start pushing a bunch of buttons. Maybe you hop on the radio. Maybe you eject. He said, the very first thing they teach us to do is to wind the clock. Because you can't break anything in the aircraft by winding the clock. And it's making your brain take that brief pause to override instant reactions and letting your brain trigger a more thought out response instead. And that's helped me in all facets of my life, personal life and professional life. So remember that, kind of like you remember stop, drop, and roll. Remember, wind the clock. And thankfully for me, I was able to manage my reactions that first day as a marketing intern. I went on to work for the Minnesota Vikings for an entire season in football operations, my dream job with my hometown team. My job involved directly working with the players and coaches. Anything they needed off the field, I was the guy. I booked flights, hotels, catered meals, passed out pay stubs, fan mail, gave them rides, you name it, I did it. Not as glamorous as what one may think. And I'm thankful for my short time with the Vikings, but it didn't take me long to realize that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Now, I want to share one last story with y'all before I get going and we kind of recap. In February of 2019, my wife and I were coming home from church one day. We had our two daughters at the time in the back. And we saw a car, we're making a right at a stoplight, and we saw cars were starting to get backed up and merging over from one of the lanes. And as we got closer, I could see there was a car stopped blocking traffic. And there were some guys out from the instant oil change that was across the street beating on the window. And as I got closer, I could see there was an older gentleman slumped over in the driver's seat. And I figured, well, they got this under control. And so I drove by. But I didn't get very far. Because my wife turned to me and she said, if that was you or my dad, I want you to stop. Because you know what you're doing. And she was right. I turned around. I ran out of the car. I came back around. By then, they had broken the back window. They got the guy out. There was one guy doing chest compressions. The others were all standing around. So I jumped in and went up to his head, put my jacket underneath, and I started to clear his airway, just like you're trained in CPR. With every chest compression that was done, some food and just other nasty stuff was not coming out. So I'm just like digging in the guy's throat, trying to clear that airway. Could have barely detected a pulse. His face was ashen. I thought he was dead right there. We still didn't hear any sirens, but out of nowhere, Clark Kent, Superman, comes in. A guy shows up with an AED. We get it hooked up. And for those of you, which I hope is all of you that have been to AED training, but if you don't know, it walks you through it. It talks you through it. It's dummy proof. We get it hooked up. It gives them a big shock, says to continue CPR. We do that. The EMTs arrive. We help load them up. And then I go home. But of course, I couldn't stop thinking about the guy. So later that afternoon, I called the public safety office, trying to get any information, knowing that they probably can't tell us much. But they said, when we dropped him off at the hospital, things were not looking too good for him. He'd gone a long time without oxygen. That evening, Sunday evening, I find out via neighborhood Facebook page that the guy's name is Carl, and he worked at the Home Depot, and he was coming back from his lunch break, hence the pieces of hot dog from Sonic that I was fish hooking out of his throat. Monday morning, I wake up and I go into Home Depot trying to find out any information on his status. And they said, it just doesn't look very good. I went back in every single day, Tuesday, Wednesday, same thing. I go back in Thursday. They said, Carl's sitting up in his hospital bed. He's telling jokes. They put a couple stents in. He had major cardiac arrest. Well, fast forward to June, about 4 months after the incident, and I'm in Home Depot, probably for like the third time that day, picking up things that I didn't know I needed on my 2 other trips. And guess who I run into? Carl! I run into Carl. And I said, Carl, the last time I saw you, you were laying in the middle of the road and I was fish hooking pieces of food out of your mouth. Now, I like to think of myself as a helpful person, but on that day, I just drove by. And I want to turn around if it hadn't been for my wife. I played a very, very small role, but a role that wouldn't have happened if my wife didn't speak up. I know that Carl was saved because of Superman that came in with the AED. But the concept of not stopping to help somebody in situations like that isn't new. It's called the diffusion of responsibility. And studies have shown over and over and over again that when we're around other people, we're less likely to offer help. Why? Because we think somebody else will do it. We need to overcome that mentality during these challenging times. One, if you need help, if you need someone to talk to, reach out. I promise you there are people that care about you and want the best for you and will listen. Second, you might have some colleagues, friends, or family that could use some help. Don't be like me and drive by. Check in, see how you can help, because we're in this together. Now, I just shared 4 ideas that I found to help me be more resilient during these challenging times. We talked about the breathing technique 448, replacing that internal narrative that you have in your head, with the word get, restricting your sleep, kind of mixing it up a little bit, trying to find that, dial it in, how much sleep you actually need. And then the last one we covered was winding the clock, being able to manage those reactions and use that more thought out response instead. They're very simple things, but they're not the end all be all. I challenge you to take one from this list, give it a try. Now you're hopefully leaving here pretty inspired and motivated, but let me tell you about some of the bigger challenges now that you're going to face, because you're going to go back to work. The phone's going to ring, the emails are going to ping, you're going to get swept back into your routine, and you're going to forget most of what I said here today. Life's going to get in the way, as it always does, and you're not going to implement. You're really excited today, which is great, but tomorrow, you just might be slightly interested. On day 3, you're going to be overwhelmed. Monday, no, nothing. The hard part is on you. And I want to be a resource for you all going forward. I would love to. So I ask that you pull out your phones again and take this quick, short survey. It's 2 questions. It's another QR code for you to scan. 1, I want to know what you thought of our time. And then my call to action is, if you know of a group or organization that would benefit from me speaking, I would love to chat with you. I need help, and I'm not too proud to ask it. I'm working hard, just like all of you, to take care of our families. And if you just want to have a conversation with somebody, if you need somebody to listen, I will absolutely do that. So please go ahead. The link is also there. If for some reason it's not working for you, the QR code, you can click it right in the chat. And I'll give you about 45 seconds to fill that out, and then I'll come back in and as you finish filling that out, as Alex said in the chat, please add any questions to the Q&A box. And as I wrap up, I want you all to remember Emmanuel and Carl. I want you to remember how my failure to speak up led to Emmanuel being killed. And I also want you to remember my wife and her speaking up, and the guy that stopped with the AED. He could have easily passed by, assumed it was under control. He had courage. Marianne Williamson said, our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate, it's that we're powerful beyond belief. Please take care of yourself, take care of each other. That light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter and brighter every day. It's one day at a time. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you can find me. Send me an email. Again, I appreciate all of you, and to the awesome folks at ILEA, Gwen and Alex, thank you so much for providing me this opportunity. I know Gwen's going to come back on and moderate any questions that y'all might have.
I'm back. So you can unshare if you'd like.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, there is my email address. I'm sorry. I just want to include that quick. Patrick@loyaltypointleadership.com.
So, so right now we have a couple. So Dawn asks, I may have missed it. What does Patrick do, and what business and where?
Yes, so Dawn, Loyalty Point Leadership is the name of the business that I started. It's me, myself, and I. And I'm working hard as a leadership development consultant, sharing my story to help inspire others to be better leaders. I have found a little bit of a niche doing a lot of workplace safety, because I've just found how much of an impact my story can have on a lot of people working in the front lines. But I will speak to any group that will sit down and listen.
And she also says, these are great ideas. We should post them onto the bathroom mirror to remind us.
Great idea.
So, and I had written down a question, but I think you kind of answered it during your presentation. I was gonna ask you, what's the one thing you do to deal with setbacks?
Man, it's definitely more than one, more than one for all of us, right?
One of the things you do.
I mean, we all have things that we turn to, and honestly, for me right now, with the current pandemic that we're in, I embrace my family. I noticed my mindset at the beginning of the pandemic was like, okay, let's just get through this. And I'm thinking too far forward, which is okay to have dreams and goals and all this stuff. But I wasn't living in the moment with my family. We're not going to be able to get this time back, whether you have a family or not. You've got friends, you've got things that you're passionate about. And if you're just putting things on hold because of this pandemic, and granted, I know there's some things that you just can't do. I get that. There's constraints out there, but we're not going to be able to get this time back. I know I'm not breaking news to anybody. And so just really trying to live in the moment and embrace that has been really important to me.
Mhm. I see a question from Jennifer in the chat. Do you journal to write down highs and lows, and how you've adapted to them?
So currently, no, not journaling. I have, yes. I kind of have a love-hate with writing. A lot of people tell me, oh, you need to write a book. And I got some internal stuff that I need to get over to be able to do that. But just writing in general, I don't know. I found it helpful at times, especially when I was in the military. I used to journal when I was in the military. That's why I have so many of these stories written down. And so I used to love doing that. And one, because I'm a history buff. History was one of my majors. And so it's important for us to be able to remember these stories, especially if you have a veteran in your life, especially World War II, Korean War, Vietnam. They didn't have the resources that we have. Please talk to them and listen to them. We need their stories out there.
Yeah. And we probably have time for one more. And I have a question here. It says, this is from Scott. It says, how did you deal with people in Iraq, Afghanistan that didn't believe in the US being there? Or rather, were you able to win over people through any specific leadership strategies?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. First of all, Scott, in my experiences, 95% of the people were ecstatic that we were there. So happy. Obviously, that doesn't get a lot of the media attention. And that's one thing that I didn't realize until I got out of the Army, was how negative things were being portrayed. And obviously, there was tragedy going on over there. But there was a lot of good going on as well. And so that's really what kept me going and motivated to keep doing what I was doing, was seeing how we're helping. We're like opening schools, and we're bringing basic needs to people. So the majority of them loved us. But yeah, there were some that didn't. And I think the thing was that we tried to meet their needs, but at the same time too, especially in Afghanistan, and we can always have a separate conversation like this, those people are survivors. Many of them, all they've known is war. And to no fault of their own, they play both sides, right? Whoever's going to be able to give and provide for them and keep them safe and secure, that's what they're going to do.
Well, unfortunately, that's all that we have time for today. Patrick, I want to thank you for being here and giving this wonderful presentation. Thanks again to the Giants Enterprises, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. And we'll be looking forward to seeing you at our next webinar coming soon. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great day.